Good afternoon and welcome to Returning to In-Person Events, Networking Tips and Tricks for Young Professionals, a webinar sponsored by the American Floral Endowment's Young Professionals Council. My name is Karen Kraus and I serve as the staff liaison to the YPC, or Young Professionals Council. The YPC offers leadership, professional development, and networking opportunities for young floral industry professionals. YPC members participate in online and in-person meetings, webinars, and other networking events to share ideas, collaborate with influential industry members, and promote careers in the floral industry. We encourage you to take a look and join us at endowment.org/YPC, which is going to be placed into the chat right now. This is a fully interactive discussion, and so we are recording it and it will be available on the endowment site and YouTube. We will also be providing you with a copy of the key takeaways, so you don't have to worry about taking notes during this. You'll have all of the follow-up materials. We encourage you to submit your questions through the Q&A feature or the chat, or if you'd like to speak directly with our panelists, you can do so by using the raise hand feature and we'll give you audio permissions to speak directly with them. Please feel free to submit your questions throughout the webinar and we will answer as we go. We aren't going to hold everything until the end. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome our two expert panelists, managing partners of FreshPath Marketing, Laura Shinall, who is also AFE's board chairman, and Melanie Spilbeler. Laura and Melanie, could you get us started by sharing a bit about your professional background in our industry?
Absolutely. Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. It's so great to be with you all. Karen, thank you so much for the introduction. Laura and I are truly honored to be here this afternoon with this group. And I know not everybody is a young professional here, and we'll make plugs throughout to join the group. But again, this is just designed to be a very interactive session. We actually are going to kick it off and we're going to hopefully get some chats going here, some questions going here, because we really want to make sure that everybody gets the most value out of this session. But as Karen mentioned before, I'm Melanie Spilbeler. I've been in the industry now for 6+ years in the floral industry. And I started my career actually working with Laura at a company called Syndicate Sales. So they are a hard goods manufacturer based out of Kokomo, Indiana. I'm actually located in Carmel, Indiana. And really at last February is when I got into this new business venture with Laura. So we both saw a very, very big need within the industry beyond just the retail florist, really everyone in the industry that just needed more marketing support, but potentially didn't know enough about marketing or didn't have the deeper pockets to hire experts in the field. So that's really where FreshPath came from. And our slogan, our motto, our passion is building and connecting products and people one brand at a time. So what we like to do is use our deep industry knowledge and all of our connections and help more people buy more flowers every single day, and help organizations in the industry figure out how to better market themselves, their products, and their services. Prior to that, I have a lot of consumer products experience, over 15+ years working in paper party goods, which coincidentally ties in very well to the floral industry. Can't have a party without paper plates and napkins and streamers, and then not have the flowers to go along with it. So it's actually a very nice complementary background that I have. And then I also have a background in digital marketing as well. So I work for a company in Indianapolis called ExactTarget. And I headed up their email marketing product suite, if you will. And so I was a product marketing manager there for a while. And that's how I gained a really strong background in digital marketing, which everybody knows that that is carrying forward every single company in every single industry, and just trying to make our industry more savvy in terms of digital marketing and not just traditional marketing methods. So that's me, that's my background. And Laura, if you want to go ahead and share your background as well.
Well, I think for sure everybody knows exactly why I hired Melanie Spilbeler 6 years ago. Her background is outstanding and is perfect for where the floral industry is today. So I've been around a little bit longer than Mel, about 40+ years. I right out of college, I went to work for a wholesale florist, had a very short stint with a retail florist, and have spent the bulk of my career in the industry with a family-owned business, actually one that my grandfather started, Syndicate Sales. So that's how Mel and I connected. And this industry has been, gosh, it's been in my blood my entire life. I can't imagine being anywhere else or doing anything else. And so when this opportunity for FreshPath Marketing came along and got me out of from behind a desk and the 275 team members and the manufacturing and all of that to get to really go in and do something fun. And I was thrilled. So there's not a better sunset career than working with Mel, and then we have a third partner, Kim Cashman. So I am smart. I have paired myself with two very young and talented professionals. So at least my 40 plus years, I did learn something. But I'm really excited to be here today and be able to talk to all y'all. And I've been on the endowment board for, we were just talking about this, a little over 10 years. So again, the endowment is near and dear to my heart. My father was once the chairman of the trustees. So it goes back a long way. It's just such a great organization. And I love the YPC. I love that this launched a few years ago and that it has the following that it does. So without further ado, Mel, is it okay if I go ahead and ask the group
Go ahead.
I'd love for y'all we'd like for you to go onto your chat. And before we even get started, if you would let us know if you plan on attending any in-person events for the remainder of the year. And if you're not, please go ahead and say that as well. But if you are, in the chat, obviously answer yes. And then if you would list what events you're planning to attend, that would be really great. That would be helpful. So we're going to give you a few minutes to find the chat and add. So far, I haven't seen the number go up. So I'm hoping that in just a minute, we're going to see more responses. So I see, there we go. There's one. Excellent.
Oh, hey, Jennifer. Now I can see names here. We're in a tricky view, just so everybody knows this, since we can't see your video, this is how we're able to see y'all. If you can put yourselves in the chat, raise your hand, we can absolutely turn on video, but thank you. Anyone else planning on going? There's Cultivate that's coming up. I mean, the number of events in this industry, I mean, we're not lacking for events, right? And after COVID and what we've seen with COVID, we really feel like people are ready to head back. We know that things are, COVID is not, we're not past it, right? We're not past it. But what we have seen through the events that we've been attending here in the last 6 months and 9 months is that when people do attend, hey, Susie, when people do attend, they are just ready to go. They're ready to get back into it. And we're going to talk about how we can maximize our time spent with those in person, because there's so much more, as we all know, to being around one another and not just, we love Zoom, we're doing it right now, but so much more you can glean from having an in-person event. So
that's right. We like seeing faces. Hey,
Nicole, hey. Awesome. I see some people going to Next Gen and Profit Blast, Fun and Sun, Cal Flowers. Wonderful, Miranda.
That sounds fun.
Absolutely. Perfect.
All right. Well, keep those cards and letters coming, folks. We'll get back to that here shortly and take a look at what some of your answers are. So, Mel, you want to get us started there?
Yeah, absolutely. So today we're gonna. Oh, that's okay, Angela. I see her chat here. So before we get into the information that we want to share while you're actually at the event, one of the things that we believe is often overlooked is just the planning component of it. So let's say, for example, you're planning on going to one of these events, but you're not necessarily going to have a table. We know that when you're sponsoring an event or if you're showing up and having a table, there's obviously a lot of prep work involved. But even as an attendee at these events, there's a lot of homework that you can do ahead of time. And so today we're just going to review kind of that quick hit checklist that we would go through if we were attending an event, but not necessarily sponsoring the event or having a table or a booth at the event. And so for us, part of our process, whenever we're going somewhere and trying to make this as quantifiable as possible is going to be important too. But what is your primary goal for attending those events? And even those of you who have answered here in the chat, for example, it looks like Juan, you're headed to Cultivate. What would you say? Have you thought about what is my goal as I head to Cultivate, or even SAF Next Gen, or these Profit Blasts? Do you have a goal in mind? And what might that be? And you can certainly enter it here in the chat function, or if you want to raise your hand, we can call on people. And
we might just call on you anyway.
Yeah, I know. We really wanted this to be interactive. So
right?
If anybody wants to speak up here, hey, Freddie, he's not shy. I know these people are not shy. I talk with you guys all the time, but feel free to jump in and raise your hand and we can call on you. But again, really thinking about the primary goals for attending the event in advance, and then figuring out the metrics associated, right, Laura?
Exactly. And everyone is going to define success differently. And there's no right or wrong answer, because everybody's reason for going to an event is different. But how you define it gives you, when you get back, if you don't know what is successful, you're going to get back and you're just not even, it's not going to resonate with you for very long. But if you know why you're going and you know what you want to get done and you know what will make it a successful event for you, A, you're going to have, it's going to be a better event for you in the long run, but B, when you get back from it, you're also going to be able to have more takeaways and apply that. Because sometimes you go to these events and it's so easy to get all caught up in the event and everything that's happening. And then you get back and you're just like, why was I even, what did I take away? Why was I there? How am I going to apply it? So what do we have? Let's see. Oh, Jennifer, education. That's right. That's a good one. And learning about where your industry is headed.
And new connections. So to take that a step further, one of the things that we would like you all to put into practice is not just writing down what that goal would be, but putting a number to it, right? So some of you on here have your own businesses or are running different departments in your organizations. And just like you would plan out a show, oh, if you're in the sales department, for example, I know Freddie is in sales, you would say, yeah, I want to meet with at least this many leads or talk to this many prospects. It could be the same thing on the education side of things. I want to attend this many breakout sessions. I want to go to both of the main industry or the general sessions. And so again, the more that you can quantify it, the more you can look back and you can say, hey, I checked these things off the list. I felt like it was a success. And a lot of times when you're attending these events, depending on whether you're a student or a professional, someone is sending you to these events, right? So a lot of times you have to justify the cost of going to the event. And if you're tracking, this is my goal, and this is a success metric associated with it, it's easier for you to do that report out instead of just when you get back trying to think, oh yeah, I got to look through my notes and figure that out. Well, no, you've done the work ahead of time. You've established your goals, and then you can go back and track them. So it just gives you something tangible to report back up to a manager who has ever given you the dollars to attend that show or that event.
Good point, Mel.
Yep. All right, so here's my lovely mug. But I want to know from everybody here, and there's a few people that already know that I use this and that Laura uses this, but how many people are already using some sort of digital business card? So we're not talking about our old school paper cards, but digital business cards. Is anybody using an app or a service for digital cards? Yes.
And I do want to, while these while these folks are answering, I do want to let everyone know that the way we came about Hi Hello is an interesting story, because when we started FreshPath, we ordered business cards. That's the first thing everybody does, right? And we ordered the business cards and they showed up the day we left for the event. So we showed up to our very first event down at Wolfson, Miami without any business cards. Not really a good look when you're launching a brand new company. So Mel found hi, hello, and it actually turned out to be an amazing conversation starter. And it was by happenstance that we stumbled onto it. Mel probably knew about it all along. I felt like I'd stumbled onto it. And it really, so it's just, it's so easy to use, and it doesn't cost anything, right, Mel? I mean,
It's a free app,
free app.
completely free. You could go on right now. Karen, it looks like she's downloading it now. The other thing that there's a few things that I really like about it. As you can see from this screenshot, I actually have a couple. Yes, Shanley, wish I would have known about it sooner. I actually have 2 different business cards, so you can add different versions. I have a work one, I have a personal one, and
Yep.
depending on who I'm interacting with, I mean, even if I'm going, let's say, to just an event out in the community, for example, it's not necessarily a work-related event, you could save different information there. And then when you actually click on that, it brings up a QR code. So the only thing the other person that you're trying to make contact with, they just have to have a smartphone. And now with the newer Androids, I think from the S10 on, and then every iPhone already has a built-in QR code scanner. So they're not doing anything extra here. They scan the QR code, they pull up the link, and they can either have your contact information, work, personal, or however you have it set up. It can be emailed or texted. And then there's also this feedback loop, which is really nice. And so it says, hey, do you want Melanie to also have your information? So then it's a fully closed loop. It's not this, oh, did I get their card and they got my card and trying to figure that out. It's all digital and it's a fully closed loop. So it's just a really nice free tool that can be used. I'm sure there's others, but this one has just been so easy to use. And I tell everybody about it. And they're actually pretty excited about it when they see it too, because it's so
We didn't
easy.
even take business cards this year.
Nope, wasn't worth it.
Nope.
And I probably would have forgot anyway, so didn't do it. But so in terms of technology, I think most of you all know that have already been to shows, but for those of you that are on here that are either students or haven't been out and about in a while just because of COVID and are just starting to get back into in-person events, so many in-person events now are actually having a mobile app available for that event. And usually you're getting that app pushed out to you in a variety of ways. It can either be promoted on the website for the actual event. A lot of times they're going to send you an email campaign that says, hey, don't forget to download our mobile app. And for example, at WFSA, what I really liked this year is that they actually make contests out of those who are participating on the app. So there's definitely a community feature in a lot of these event apps. But it is so good for a variety of things. I just pulled screenshots of the Cultivate one because I know that show's coming up and some of you may be going to this. But it has the floor plan. It will have every single agenda item laid out. And a lot of times with this, so under my show planner here, if you were to download this, you can actually customize your daily agenda and set reminders. So again, if you're not using technology or the apps when you're going to these events, you're doing yourselves a disservice. I love paper and that's great, but I guarantee you I'm going to lose that agenda at some point. So having the app on your phone is just, it's a no-brainer for sure. Go ahead, Laura.
No, totally agree with that. In fact, I was even receiving messages prior to getting to WFSA this year.
Yep.
With folks that said, are you, I see you on the list. I see you're going to be there. I'd like to get together and all that. Sure, they could have emailed me, but it might have, fallen through the cracks. But because it came on the app, I knew exactly why they were reaching out, and it just made it so much easier. And I could just respond right then and there. And Mel's right. It's with the agenda. I lose stuff all the time. So I'm always leafing through a bag trying to find, what's next. And by the time I find it, I've missed it. So having it on the app is very convenient.
Right. And using it before, during, and after the event is something to remember too. That information hangs out there for some of these events, it's there a year afterwards. So if there is a contact or an exhibitor or somebody that you can't quite remember who you met or who that was at the show, you can always go back and use that as a reference point, because a lot of times on the websites, they're going to, as soon as that show's over, they're going to pull it down and they're going to start promoting next year's show. So it's just a really nice reference tool to go back to after you've attended. So keep that in mind too. So the other thing that, again, we are very big on this now that we have our own brand new company, not really brand new, it's been a year now, but we're really big on requesting, either requesting the attendee list or scanning the attendee list. So what's really important is ahead of time, if you're planning out not just your educational sessions and what you're trying to attend, but being very intentional about who you are trying to make connections with. And again, using not just the lists, not just the apps that are available, but also doing some research behind the scenes on LinkedIn is really important. And I think the other thing that is a little bit often overlooked is that you should always check your LinkedIn profile before you're headed out. So again, with COVID, I think, you know, there's certain things that we've just either let fall by the wayside, or maybe we haven't kept us up to date because we haven't really been traveling and out and about and in-person networking as much as we have in the past. So I think it's just a little reminder, if you're about to journey out there and start chatting with people, they're going to look for you. And so just make sure across all your social media apps, if they are public facing, that it is up to date.
It's all up to date. Yep.
Yes. Yes. And it's representing your personal brand and even your professional brand in the way that you want it represented. And we're going to talk a little bit more about personal branding here in the next few slides. Is there anything else you would add to that one, Laura?
I don't think so. I think it's pretty succinct. Keep it all up to date.
Okay, good. And then I think, you know, we would be remiss if we didn't bring up COVID and how this plays in to getting back to in-person events. Some of the things that we've learned over the last 12 months is that researching the COVID protocols literally up until the day before you go is going to be super important with new variants and new strains and just different things being rolled out often. It's important to know immediately. Now, a lot of times the shows and events will do a really great job, but like for the event location itself, but even if you're going to venture off property, knowing what the protocols are pretty important. I mean, I think we went to a WFSA event where the hotel we were staying at had certain requirements for certain places that you wanted to go within the hotel. So just being really mindful and doing your research ahead of time, not just relying on the website for the event, but knowing that location in general, where they stand in terms of protocols is really important.
Well, and knowing what your personal comfort level is and how you want to respond, because if your personal comfort level is one that maybe you're still more comfortable wearing a mask, or you don't want to hug, or you don't want to shake hands, knowing how you want to approach folks. Maybe, you know, when you walk up and you see a hugger coming at you and you know this person is just going to want to wrap you in a bear hug, you need to know how you're going to respond to that before it becomes, you know, uncomfortable, and be prepared for how others are going to be, how they're going to be responding, right? So not everybody's at the same comfort level, and how you want to handle it, and then being respectful of how other folks want to handle it. I think it sounds like it should be, you know, obvious, but sometimes it isn't.
Right. And there's just a new normal that's been established now. So just being aware of the new normal, again, especially if you haven't been out and about yet, and this is more of like, you're getting prepared, you're here and you're trying to understand what you should be prepared for. There is a new normal that's been established because of COVID. And so just being mindful of that is really important. And we wanted to make sure we mention that. So this is another plan before you go type of situation. I don't think I do this all the time, but this is a very good reminder, not only planning every single session, but how many of you are actually thinking about, if you were to walk into a speaker session, what are 3 questions that you would ask that speaker? And so whether that speaker actually answers those things or not during their speaking engagement or during the panel discussion, then you're already great. Like, you've gotten out of it what you really wanted to get out of it. But there's always going to be a Q&A. There's going to be a Q&A today. And it would be really great to go in and already have prepared a question, because there's always this moment where everybody looks around the room at the end of a session and that speaker is waiting. I've been that speaker. I'm waiting.
Mhm.
I'm wanting someone to ask that question. So I think it's a great idea to have attendees be prepared right away with their burning questions or something that they really wanted to know.
I think
from the
that's
speaker.
important, Mel, that you said, being the speaker, you want that question. And that's true. I have been in the chair with a question, but didn't know whether I should ask it or not. And, I remember even maybe it was you, I leaned over and I said a question and you said, are you asking me to ask that question or are you going to ask that question?
Right.
And you just never know if that's, is my question going to be good? Am I going to sound goofy? There are no goofy questions. And the speaker really does want to hear what did they get you to think about? What did their words resonate? How do they resonate with you?
Absolutely. So that is our plan before you go, I would say. So this is kind of the pre-event work, and that's really important. But now let's get into what happens when you're there. So this is probably our favorite slide, not just
It
because
is
there's
so my favorite slide.
goofy graphics on it, but don't be a wallflower. But on the other hand, don't be a party animal. And so I'll take the wallflower one, and Laura, if you want to take party animal, does that sound
Sure.
about right? Can we do that?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. So, I think people are often shocked when I tell people this, but I actually am a very, very introverted person. And so I think it's really easy when you go to these events and you haven't met a lot of industry people yet, or you're traveling by yourself. Maybe you're the Lone Ranger for your school or your organization, and you've got to go into it. Well, the only way that you're really going to maximize the time that's spent there is truly by meeting others that are there. And there are going to be others that are in the same shoes that you're in, meaning that they may be the only ones from their organization, or they may not know a lot of other people there. So one of the things that I try and force myself to do is, a couple things. If you walk into a room and it's seating only, like let's say it's a huge general session. I remember Laura used to tell us this all the time when we worked together at Syndicate. Sit with someone you don't know. Of course, you're going to have, maybe you have those 3 people that you've always sat with because those are your buddies at convention, but try and push yourself out of that comfort zone and sit with someone that you really don't know. So that's kind of number 1 about being a wallflower. Let's say you're at a networking cocktail hour, for example, and there's, sometimes people that are standing on the fringes or on the edge and just kind of sipping their drink and watching everything happen. Well, don't be afraid to be that person that goes up to them and actually introduces yourself, because they're just as much hoping, maybe I'll interact, as you're hoping to interact. And so just not being afraid of that interaction and really just going for it and pushing yourself out of your comfort zone is important. And I think one of the ways that you can, that'll make it a little bit easier, and I'm interested because I'm going to ask a question that hopefully people will answer here, is think, just like you're planning ahead before you're going, think of a list of icebreaker questions that you would ask that stranger at that cocktail party. So very obvious is, okay, what organization or school are you with? Those are pretty obvious, but other things like, what drew you to come to this event? Was there a certain topic that was interesting? Was there a certain speaker that you really wanted to hear about? Other things could be, all right, what's been your favorite part of the convention or event so far? What have you thought was most interesting? And just naturally, those types of questions, and even being prepared with 2, is going to lead to something else that you can connect with somebody that you've never met before. Laura, do you have anything else to add to the don't be a wallflower discussion?
Nope. But I do want to just preface this next one. Just because I got the party animal slide does not mean I'm the party animal. You kind of alluded to the fact that you were an introvert and a wallflower, and that made me think,
I
oh
set
my
you up
goodness,
for that, Laura.
does that mean that I'm the party animal of the 2 of us? Those of you out there that know me know that's probably not my reputation, but your reputation is extremely important. And so you have to know that when you go to these events that you're representing more than just yourself, right? You're representing your company or your school. And so all of your actions are a reflection on yourself and again on your company or your school. And so it's very important. And I like to think about every interaction is an interview or a potential interview, right? So even if you're out with friends, right? You're hanging around the bar in the evening and you're with friends, you really never know when that friend, you might want to hire that friend or when that friend might want to hire you. And so it's, while it could be tempting to maybe have one more drink, or for some of you, it might be tempting to dance on the bar or, but remember those actions stay in folks' minds a lot longer than yours, particularly if you've had too much. You might not remember what you did, but folks that are there will. And so it's important, go and have fun, but it is not a time, it's not a time to be a party animal. And your reputation is the only thing that you have when you leave. It's what you have forever. And the industry, we recycle a lot of people in this industry. There's a lot of folks that kind of go from one company to the next. And so it's important that every time you have an opportunity to be in front of a potential employer, or you have an opportunity to be in front of potential team members that you want to hire, that you're putting your best foot forward and you're representing yourself well.
Absolutely. And the question that I did have to group, so we'll skip back to Wallflower for a second, is I'm curious, does anybody have a networking or icebreaker question that's kind of their go-to that they always like to use, that maybe somebody else who's on the webinar today would get value from, that I didn't mention? Does anybody else have one? I know we have some conversationalists that are here. I know who you are. So if you have a question that you like to ask all the time, please share it with the group. That'd be great. I can't be the only introvert. I know I'm not the only one here that has to practice this stuff. So
I have to practice it. I always have to gear up before going out in public.
Ooh, quiet. It's silence. Well, we're going to wait on that. Think about your icebreaker questions and then let us know. Like we said before, we're going to share all this information in a really helpful handout. So you'll have our list if you need it. I'm going to go on to the next. These were the icebreaker questions and a fist bump. I'm going to go on to the next tips that are happening during the event, but really what we like to say is a picture is worth 1,000 words, and it's not just because we're a marketing company, but don't forget to snap pictures, snap videos while you're at the event. So a lot of times it's really easy, and I'm guilty of this sometimes too, to not take enough in-person, media snaps or whatever, and I just get so caught up in what's going on. But if you are one of the only people that's attending from your organization, that's going to be one of the best ways that you can communicate the value of what you've gotten from that event to others in your organization or in your school. And then, of course, as you all know, is so important, even for your personal brand. So if this is you posting personally, to use the relevant hashtags. They always have either a hashtag, or if you're tagging the event specifically, that they're trying to use to promote the event. And so just knowing what those things are ahead of time, or even looking on the mobile apps, sometimes they'll have them contained in the mobile apps, or tracking the event's handle on Instagram. That's where you're going to get all that information about relevant hashtags, who the people are that you should be tagging. And that might even lead to more followers and more follows for your personal brand or for your company's brand throughout the show.
When you think about it, Mel, I mean, it's the content is fantastic, right? Flowers. Too. I mean, the arrangements are beautiful. The hotels are always decked out. And to your point, once you start posting all these beautiful pictures, your followers will probably increase.
Yes. And people want to follow along with you. We have a gorgeous and beautiful industry, and we owe it to everyone, even consumers, to do the best job possible with sharing that.
That's right.
sharing the value, not only of the sessions that we're going to, but of the beauty that exists whenever we go to these events, because they're always gorgeous.
And for those of you out there that are business owners, sharing also, if folks see what you do, it also, it's a great way to attract new team members, right? Because maybe they don't know what the floral industry is all about, or maybe they're just designers or they're not designers, right? And they think, if I don't design, then why would I be in this industry? But all these gorgeous pictures, there's so much you can glean from taking those pictures, posting them. It's not just about sharing it with your friends and wow, isn't this pretty? But there are some good business strategies behind them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then the other thing, as it relates to sharing the information, so this is just a really tactical thing that I've learned over the years that's important, is it's really easy to get caught up in the whirlwind of events, just like we get caught up in the whirlwind of our work lives, and not sit back at the end of the day and reflect on what we truly got just from that day. Because I think, Laura, correct me if this doesn't happen to you, this is amazing, but I get at the end of an event and I am exhausted, just fully exhausted from all of the talking, all of the networking, all of the everything. And so the one thing that I've learned is, before you go to bed at the end of the night, you're going to take notes throughout the day, and that's great. But at the end of the night, go back and review those notes and really highlight what are the key takeaways at the end of that day. And then furthermore, what are the action items from the end of that day? So you can kind of put things in two categories. You can have your notebook, you can look at that day's events and say, hey, here were the things that I really learned that I thought were valuable, the key takeaways. But on the other side, it's going to be, what is my follow-up as soon as I get home? Because sometimes it's really hard if you are at a 4-day event, a 3-day event, or you've just been on this whirlwind tour back to back, going from event to event. It's going to be hard to remember everything that you've got to do when you get back in the office. So that's why I like to have two kind of columns that say the key takeaways and then the action items. And that keeps me focused so that I can use everything that I've learned and follow up on everything I need to follow up at the end of that event or that conference or that seminar.
And I love the fact here, Mel, that you talk about sharing with your colleagues and peers, professors, what you're doing, what you've learned. Sometimes attending these events is a reward for whatever reason, right? And so then there's folks that would have liked to have gone but couldn't or didn't, and so maybe bringing that home and back to them and sharing. I think there's a real value to that.
Right. And the other thing, and we're seeing this with some of the clients that we're working with, if you have a shared space, this is just another suggestion for those that are with organizations that might be a little bit larger, or you can even suggest this to your leadership or your managers, but creating a shared public folder or a shared space that is by event, so people can access all the resources from that. So let's say there was a good presentation. Let's say everybody, this tips and tricks worksheet that we're going to send you, that this takeaways, you can put that in a folder, and then you can share that back as a resource with your organization. Your leadership, your managers are going to be more likely to send you or other team members to that place if they can see there's like actual tangible education and value coming out of it, along with the great images or the gallery, or here's what I saw at the event. And I would even suggest, because we actually had to do this at my previous company, if I went to an event, I had to present back to my peers what I learned from that event. So it was going through and presenting back all of the information that I had gleaned from the event, and then what my takeaways were. And so that may be just something, even from a professional growth standpoint, if you really want to step it up in your organization and show them that you're serious about growing within it and becoming a leader in your organization, even if they don't ask, suggest.
Good point.
So we're flying through everything right now, and I haven't seen a lot of other questions come through. Karen or Shanley, have you seen other questions come through in the Q&A or the other chat features here?
Do not see any right now.
Okay. All right. So on this slide here, as we mentioned before, we cannot stress enough all the benefits of being in person. And we know with COVID that gets people a little bit nervous, but what we also know from the events that we have been in is that they just provide absolutely 100% more networking opportunities, the amount of impromptu conversations, ideas, just everything that happens when you're in person, it's very hard to replicate virtually. Even here in this virtual setting, if we were all in person right now, I know that this would be a little bit of a different session, right? The amount of energy, just the pure energy from being in the presence of these other peoples, it would spawn something completely different and unique. And there would be definitely more in-depth Q&A as part of it, for sure. And then obviously on-site educational opportunities, really encourage everybody. And some people are already going to these events, but when you have the chance, let's say you're new and starting out in this industry, or there's a segment or a portion of the industry you don't quite understand, I highly encourage you to go on, and I have a couple people on here who will know what I'm talking about, but go on these adult field trips and go on the tours, do the tours. Go and see what it's like in the supply chain, go to the farms, go to the breeders, because that is how you are going to fully immerse yourself in everything that this industry has to offer. And not just get this small little segment of it. If you're the retail florist, if you're just in a certain part of the supply chain, if you're just in research, perhaps, if you can see the full scope, because this is the smallest big industry I've ever seen. And I've learned that from the very beginning, and Freddie on the adult field trips, but go on those tours, because you are going to learn so much more. And you can't replicate that in a virtual setting at all. So it's highly encouraged. There's a lot of great opportunities that are coming up here really soon where you can go on the adult field trips, see everything as it's working in action, and really be boots on the ground, not only for your personal growth, but also bringing that back to your company and sharing with them.
So I actually have a question. You talked a bit about follow-up and bringing it back to your company, but how do you recommend keeping connections post-event so that it's not just like, hi, I met you here, I'm going to add you on LinkedIn and then never hear from you ever again? How do you recommend building those relationships into something that's more lasting?
Laura, do you want me to take this one?
Well,
you want to go ahead?
Well, you go ahead, and I've got some thoughts, but you go ahead.
Sure. I think one of the things that's so interesting, and YPC is a perfect example of this, but there are peer groups that are starting to form within these different organizations that we would highly encourage you to become a member of. And so these different peer groups are either forming through a community forum on Facebook, for example, or with YPC, you can actually join and become a part of it. So extending your involvement beyond just sometimes comes down to just becoming a part of that network on a regular basis and understanding where the community extension is going forward. I think the other thing too that's really important is, and I'm a planner and I love to do this, but you may even want to put check-ins on your calendar, right? So a month out or 2 months out, let's say you immediately followed up with somebody and you had a great connection. Just mark it on your calendar. Hey, I'm going to reach out to this person in two months from now, just to see what they're up to, what's going on in their world. And that just keeps the conversation going. So you're not waiting a year until you see them at that same event again. You've had touch bases in between, you've built a connection, and you can bounce ideas off one another. So those would be a couple of my thoughts.
It's just all about being intentional, right? And so you're not going to connect with or reconnect with everyone that you met, but there are going to be a handful of folks that kind of stand out. You had a more in-depth conversation, or you had more in common, and even if they're not in your segment, even if they're different, maybe you read an article that reminds you of something that you discussed, and then you just, people really appreciate it when you reach out and say, hey, I saw this article and it reminded me of a conversation that we had when we were both at Cultivate. And I wanted to reach out, see how you are. And then I had a couple of questions on what I read, because I know this is your area. So I think there are a lot of ways, but you have to be intentional. And I think that's probably the most important, actually being intentional with all of these events, right? Any in-person event. if I had to take away 2 words from this presentation and all of my experience and all of the events that I've attended over the years, it's the ones where I was intentional that I really found value in.
I have a question as well. On the opposite end of the spectrum, do you recommend trying to reach out to potential connections ahead of the event?
Absolutely.
Mhm.
I do. If you're comfortable enough with doing that, that's part of that whole pre-planning process. And I think people, you know what, I think they will also appreciate it because when they go there too, they actually have a purpose behind it as well.
Right.
You're helping them set intention for what they're trying to get out of the event. So absolutely, I highly recommend that. And again, being that introverted person that people are often surprised about, sometimes it's hard to push yourself. But again, if you are really trying to get the most out of where you're going and that event, you know, again, make the most of it ahead of time, during, and after.
Totally agree.
All right. Well, I'm still trying to see if anybody is brave
We
enough to
failed
ask.
at interactive, Mel.
I know. Well, you know, I tried here. I know that there's folks on the phone that I could definitely call out and ask. Does anybody have any questions about industry events just in general? Like there were a bunch of suggestions here about events to go to. Does anybody have specific questions? Laura and I, well, Laura alluded to how long she's been around and we've been to a lot of these events, but are there any specific questions or about events that are going on that anybody would want to know about?
So if I go back, do we have a few minutes, Karen?
Yep.
Can we pick on people?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right. So Jennifer, you said, I'm going to send a few staffers to SAF. That tells me that you think there's value at SAF. And so if you're comfortable, would you explain why you think it's valuable to send some staffers to SAF, the next gen?
Jennifer, I've given you perms to talk if it's a bit easier than
Okay.
typing.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you.
Okay. I just think education is just so key. We talk about employee retention right now. A lot of people or businesses are having a hard time getting employees and retaining them, and sending them to events like this is a perfect opportunity to give them an insight of what our industry is like, and it helps retain them. It's kind of like a perk. So I am a huge believer in education. I feel like a lot of our industry is always giving. We love to share ideas with each other, but we also need to be poured into as well. So
Yep.
in order for us not to experience burnout, and if we don't want our employees to be burned out, it's important to send them to events like this so that they get excited again. And, you know, after 2 years we've been fortunate where we've been really busy. Our whole industry is, and a lot of us have burnout. So it's really important to do. And there's so many great events that I kind of have to diversify myself and my staff and kind of pick and choose who's going to go to what.
You know, that's a really good point about retention, because when you go to an event, I mean, I think we all feel that way, right? When you go to an event, you feel more connected, you feel more invested. And so now it's not just, you know, I work for a company that sells flowers. Now you're part of an industry, you know, and you're part of the floral industry, and it makes a big difference. That's a really good point. And retention is, boy, it's critical. It's hard to find good folks. And so when you find them, you want to keep them. Thank you very much. And I appreciate you stepping up and letting us pick on you. So who else can we pick on? Is there anyone else in here? I know there is. Susie Kostick, you've been around, not quite as long as I have, but you've been around. What are your thoughts on events?
I believe we also have a question in the chat.
Oh, we do.
Yeah. So we have a question from, and I'm sorry if I don't pronounce this correct, Srijana. She said, so I reached out to someone after I met them at an event, but I didn't hear back. How long should I wait to follow up the event? Will it be considered rude if I do so?
I don't think it would be rude.
It's not rude. It's not rude. That's the whole point. That's why you're there. That's why you've probably exchanged your contact information. I think it's important, yes, to give people a breather and a break in a few days to return back and unbury themselves sometimes from the mountain of emails that they have, but it's not a rude gesture to follow back up with them. And depending on your role or within an organization, if you're a student, that's just natural. That's part of networking. And that's part of getting your name out there and or exchanging information with another person. So
That's right. And and sometimes you might have reached out and it fell down way below, right? So here's Jennifer saying she has some that contact her daily. We're very busy industry. She, that's exactly right. And depending on the time of year that you're reaching out, I know I often get emails from folks, and it's not that I see it, I open it, I intend to get back, but life happens, business happens. A couple of days later, that email is way down the bottom, and I'm not scrolling down, so it's not top of mind anymore. So there's absolutely nothing wrong with getting back to the top of somebody's inbox.
and using technology to help you and remind you is really important too. So just that, sometimes even setting a reminder to say, you know what, I'm just gonna, if you did your action items, setting a reminder for 5 days after the event or however long you're gonna wait and say, okay, here's my list of follow-ups. Or if you're fancy and you're using a CRM, a customer relationship management tool, and actually setting specific tasks for yourself within that tool, that will help you stay focused and know exactly, okay, this was my first outreach point. Here's going to be my second outreach point. So again, don't be afraid to let technology help you with that communication flow and that schedule. No problem.
Thank you.
Yep. Yep. iPhone Notes app. Yep. That's perfect.
That's a good one.
Really good. Really good.
I also always use my iPhone's notes app. I find myself needing to clean it out every once in a while. So if you're using it, make sure you're also going back to it.
Good
That's a
point.
good point. It's easy to just leave it there.
I'm thinking there are
Language.
more introverts out there than I realized.
We're
I
trying to convert.
Seriously, I tend to think maybe, Mel's an introvert, I'm an introvert. But I think there are a lot more out there that, than I thought.
I also think COVID has made more people into introverts or more used to being introverted versus extroverted.
Isn't that the truth?
I do think it's about getting back into practice again. If you have been out of practice for 18 months or 2 years at an in-person event, it can just be awkward. And again, I think that's okay. I think it's okay that make a joke of it, really. Like, yeah, I know we haven't done this for 18 months or for, 6 months. Like, make a joke of it because you're not the only one that may be feeling awkward after this period of non-in-person
Right.
contact, right?
Way back in the day when WFSA used to be a very large trade show and not a conference, I remember showing up one time and there was a gentleman walking towards me, and I knew I'd seen him before. I just couldn't remember his name. And as he got closer and I looked at his badge, he had a sticker, and on the sticker it said, "Don't worry, I don't remember your name either." And
There
that
you
has stuck with me for a very long time, because if I can't remember it, there's a real good chance that they don't remember either.
Yep. Oh, I reintroduce myself all the time, even though I know, because I'm terrible with names. There's a lot of people, unless you're a teacher like my spouse is, like, it's really hard sometimes to remember everyone you meet. So I'm never shy or afraid about saying, you know what, I know we've met before, or I've seen you before. Reintroduce yourself. It's okay if they're not wearing that name badge to do that. Don't be afraid of that.
All right, well, if there's no more questions, I think we can go ahead and close out the session. We're coming up on the hour. I want to thank everyone for joining us today and give a huge thank you to both Laura and Melanie for sharing your expertise with us. Please remember to take a look at the endowment's additional resources for young professionals at endowment.org/YPC. If you sign up to become a member, you will be informed of all of our upcoming webinars and events that will be both in person and online. The link is provided again in the chat. And for additional career resources and industry job opportunities, you can check out our Career Center, which is at afecareercenter.com, which will also be linked into the chat. As a follow-up from this session, all attendees will be getting a handout that goes through and gives you all of the networking tips and tricks. So if you want to print that out and bring it to your next industry event, you absolutely can. We will also give you the webinar recording. So that'll give us a day or two to process that. Expect an email sometime in the next few days. Thank you all again and have a wonderful evening.
And don't hesitate to reach out to Mel or me if you have any questions after this, please.
Thank you so much. Have a good afternoon, everyone. Take
Bye.
care.
Bye.